Wow, unbelievable. Thank you so much. And Reverend Fred, amazing, as usual. It's funny. I've probably been in 200 Unity churches over the years doing my tours. Almost every minister, when I tell them my Overland Park is my home ministry, they go, "Oh, you know Reverend Fred?" They don't call him Reverend Fred, I call him Reverend Fred. He makes music sacred. All right, so I'm so glad to be back here. It's been a while, it's been a few years. And I think I did a healing class a couple of years ago. But I wanted to tell you, you guys have something very, very special. Like I said, I've been in a lot of Unity churches. And your collective consciousness is greater than any minister. It's the collective consciousness that actually makes the ministry, not the minister. And the amazing thing is, you've got some incredible people here. Reverend Bob, I call him the cosmic teddy bear. But I remember my all-time favorite moment of any Unity minister was Reverend Bob standing right where I am doing the Macarena in front of a huge group in this church. I swear, and anything you can swear on, that was it. And of course, Reverend Jan and Reverend Brandon, incredible group of people here. And soon to be Reverend Jean, I guess, right? Jeannie? Right. And so today we're going to talk about miracles. And I love talking about miracles. Scientists hate miracles because when a miracle happens, it violates laws of nature. And yet, when you look at modern day physics, miracles happen all the time in modern day physics. Let me give you some examples. Let's say you have a electron. Well, I'll just use this as an example. We know that an object can't be in two different places at the same time, right? Wrong. Electrons, when nobody's observing them, they miraculously turn into energy waves. So they're everywhere all at the same time. That's kind of a miracle, by the way. We're going to come back to that in a minute. An even bigger one now is Einstein's theory of relativity. The fundamental pillar upon this theory is nothing can go faster than the speed of light. Well, in 1931, a very couple of famous physicists by the name of Schrödinger and Heidelberg proposed something called quantum entanglement. Now, quantum entanglement is if you have a couple electrons circling an atom, and if you were to separate them, they would be quantumly entangled, which means they're beyond any time-space limitations. So if you were to push on one of them, the other one would instantaneously go in the exact same direction. So instantaneously that if they were to communicate with each other, it'd be faster than the speed of light. Einstein hated this theory. He called it spooky action at a distance at one point. Finally, in 1981, Einstein was proven wrong. They redid that experiment I think it was last year, in the new cyclotron in Switzerland. And they found that the communication between electrons was not only faster than the speed of light, it was 10,000 times faster than the speed of light. If you're going to break a law of nature, you might as well go all the way. However, the spookiest thing in physics right now is consciousness itself. For many years, they've been avoiding a bunch of research that they proved earlier because the consequences are so spectacular. And the research is, believe it or not, you cannot have matter unless you have consciousness. Let me give you an example. Most everybody in here has probably seen the movie What to Believe. Remember that section where they were shooting that little balls of electrons through that slit? And as long as there was an eye watching, the balls stayed balls. But as soon as the eye went away, it turned into energy waves. It became like liquid or energy waves or any kind of waves. We've all seen that example where you put a couple of pebbles. If you drop them in a little pond or bathtub, they'll create waves, and the waves will interfere with each other. Well, same way with this. So what happens is, as long as a person's watching it, the electrons stay matter. Without the watching, they become energy waves. Now, what are the implications of this? They're huge. What it means is we wouldn't have a universe unless there was a perceiver, because there would be no matter. Without matter, you would have no substance. You'd have nothing. You'd have energy. Energy in its unrefined state is sheer potential. There's nothing there. So consciousness is needed for the universe to even exist. Finally, after years of research, a couple of brave physicists from Stanford University have suggested maybe we're creating the universe by looking out there in our telescopes. We have consciousness, maybe we're creating it. I think that's a stretch. A couple of physicists from India have suggested, and again, this has all been in the last few years, that maybe the whole universe is consciousness itself. Maybe the quantum field is consciousness. Regardless, however you slice it, consciousness is critical. Personally, I think science has discovered God. Who is that perceiver? It's got to be God. But now, the good thing is we have consciousness. We have that same force that creates the whole universe, collapses energy waves into particles within us. It's really funny because, you hear all the great traditions. They say, we're made in the image of God. What could be a better image if we're all consciousness? We're all part of the same whole. Another image is, in the unity tradition, we're co-creators. How can we be co-creators unless we're part of God? Well, we obviously are part of God because we have consciousness too. So consciousness is huge. So what does the research on consciousness say? I like to separate into categories. One of the categories, of course, is the prayer research. Now, I love the prayer research. Some of my favorite studies have been done. In fact, one of the reasons why I love Unity Church so much is because they believed in their message so much, they subjected it to scientific scrutiny. They were involved in some of the best prayer studies around. And some of you may not know this, but Reverend Bob was involved with some of that. But in the beginning, way back in the 1980s, they did the first prayer studies, and people would pray for one ward of the hospital, and they wouldn't pray for the surrounding wards. And the wards they prayed for would get well faster, have better quality of life, have less need for antibiotics, and in some cases less deaths than the surrounding wards. Most scientists, however, poo-pooed this early research. He said that what was really going on was that people doing the praying had the best doctors and the best nurses in that particular ward. And the people doing the praying had an uncanny knack of figuring out which of those wards had the best doctors and the best nurses. Of course, I'm being facetious here. And finally, they did a double-blind study in 1981 of prayer. And double-blind is where you randomly assign people to groups. You pray for one group, you don't pray for the other group. And they're interspaced randomly through the hospital. And guess what? They had the same research findings as the other prayer research. And I've had a bunch of these studies. And finally, most scientists said, okay, there is something to prayer. But what prayer really is, it's positive thinking. But is prayer just positive thinking? Or is there something more to it? Interesting question. We all know the value of positive thinking, right? You can't be coming to this church without knowing the value of positive thinking. But, interestingly enough, a study was done in 1999 at Unity Church. Actually, Unity Church participated in this study. It was done at a hospital where they did something called a triple-blind study. Now, what's a triple-blind study? Let's say I'm sick, and let's say Reverend Bob's praying for me, and I get well faster because he's praying for me. But I didn't know he's praying for me. Then it can't be due to positive thinking. Is that clear? Yeah, so in other words, if I don't know he's praying for me and I get well faster, it can't be due to positive thinking. Well, that's precisely the experiment they did, a triple-blind study. The people that were being prayed for didn't know they were being prayed for. And what they did is that everybody that entered a hospital for a 6-month period, all 1,200, were again separated in 2 different groups. And one was prayed for and one was not prayed for, and they weren't even told. And bingo, same exact results as the other prayer research. Now this blew a lot of people's minds. How can prayer work unless there's no positive thinking? Amazing. And what's even more amazing is that our energy waves in our brain, the electromagnetic field in our brain, does not even get past our skull bones for the most part. So there's no energy emanating from our brain that can account for healings at a distance. No energy at all. No energy at all. Kind of one of those spooky actions at a distance. The same with the research on meditation. Those who saw the movie What to Bleep, this is the research that I was involved with. Those who saw the movie What to Bleep know that we took 4,000 meditators into Washington, D.C. and actually changed the crime rates while we were there. And we all waltzed in. I think we came in and stayed in a big, huge ballroom downtown. And we told the mayor, Marion Barry, remember Marion Barry was the cocaine mayor. And he was clean then. At least we hope he was. And then there was, of course, the police chief. We even told the newspapers. And we were that sure it was going to work. As long as we got enough people there, we knew it would work. Because we'd done 20 other studies. And like I said, I was the first one to get any of these studies published. But every time I worked on one of these studies, I mean, it was amazing. They were significant. So, and we'd be sitting there for, we'd start at meditating about 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning. We'd continue on to about 1. And then we'd start meditating again back about 3:30, and then all the way to about 7. About 8 hours there. And while we were there, the crime rates went down 23%, just as we predicted. If it didn't work, they would have poo-pooed all our earlier research. So, interestingly enough, there's a lot of people talking about intentions. And I wanted to bring this point up, because according to intention theory, we should have been thinking about crimes the whole time we were meditating, right? You watched the movie The Secret, Joe Vitale, who's Mr. Intention, who, by the way, no longer believes in intentions. Just a little it made the whole huge point that you've got to focus on what you want. If you don't focus on it, then you're not going to get it. And if you don't get it, it's your fault for not focusing hard enough. That's basically the bottom line, right? Well, using that theory, we should have, in order to get those changes in crime rates, we should have been focusing on crimes the whole time we were there. But guess what? We never once thought about crimes the whole time we were meditating. We just simply let it go. We let it go. Because when you want something, what are you attracting? Lack. You don't have it. You have to do it a different way. So, and again, the meditation research had the same exact problem with it, in a sense, that the prayer research does. Because there is no energy emanating from our brains that can account for this stuff. There's no energy. It's one of those spooky things. Or maybe we're all quantumly entangled. If what we do inside can actually change the outside world, we don't need to worry about the outside. We just need to change ourselves. Another whole angle on this, one that works. We've proven it. That's how we were able to change crime rates in the outside world. Now, the last study I'm going to have a chance to explain is the study that was kind of done by accident. And this one is a quantum study for sure. This one was, it was kind of like a psychic experiment. They had a bunch of people in front of TV screens, and every 8 seconds, a new photograph would come up on the screen. And those photographs were either one of two types, either a negative photograph or a positive. The negative one was really gruesome, people in morgues. And the positive one was nature scenes. And the people in front of the machines had to guess in advance which photograph was going to come up there. And unfortunately, they couldn't do it. But lucky for us, that's not the end of the story. Because what happened was, because the negative photos were so gruesome, the scientists decided to hook people up to something called the GSR machine, galvanic skin response. And what that means is that it's similar to a lie detector, and it measures anxiety in your body. And what they anticipated, there'd be a spike in anxiety every time the negative photo was presented. Well, they did indeed have a spike in anxiety. But the spike of anxiety happened 2 seconds before the negative photo was presented. Unbelievable. They replicated that study because nobody believed the results. They replicated that study in another independent laboratory. And then they even looked inside the brain using MRIs. They found the whole brain would light up with anxiety about 4 seconds before the negative photo was presented. So, again, how can we know things that happen before they do? Well, this study lay dormant for about 12 years. And then last year, a very famous psychologist, Dr. Bem, decided to revisit that experiment. And what he decided to do was, using college kids, he basically did the same experiment, and he did it 10 times. 9 of them came out significant. It blew people's minds. So he got it published in the Journal of Social Psychology, with the editors for the Journal of Social Psychology saying, we don't know what he did, but he must have done something wrong. Can you help us figure out what he did? He's a world-famous psychologist. He's in every textbook. I've taught a lot of psychology classes. So basically what I've done is I've kind of given you a kind of brief synopsis of a bunch of studies that prove that we have quantum field properties in our consciousness. This has huge implications. First of all, one of the biggest implications is life after death. If our consciousness is indeed a quantum field, which the research proves, then when the brain dies, our consciousness doesn't have to die. Right? Something continues on. And I think in a roundabout way, science has even discovered God, as much as they hate to admit it. They can't admit it. But it's kind of like sitting there staring in the face. But even more importantly, I think, is the realization that this research brings us is that together we can make a bigger difference than we can alone. One of the reasons why I think we come together in this incredible Unity Church is we can have 500 people meditating together. That is going to do more for changing the world than anything else we can do. Together, we can make a bigger difference than we can alone. It's huge. And in that regard, so many of us feel helpless. So many feel like we're not making a difference. But that's simply not true. There's been a couple of amazing things that have happened in the last few months. First of all, 2 weeks ago, they just did a poll. 65% of all Americans are now for gay marriage. Just 2 years ago, 65 were against. Yeah, exactly. That's because of you doing this work of meditating together. There was no big political discussion. There was no big anything that happened. It was just a shift in the collective consciousness. We're moving towards greater love and greater connection. Those boundaries are disappearing. Another one. Remember when President Obama was bombed Syria, right? Guess what else happened? The Unity Day of Peace. There was thousands of Unity people meditating during that time. Huge deal. Also, the Pope prayed for peace. First time in the history of all the popedoms, all the popes. He meditated, he prayed for 4 hours straight. Never has a pope in the history of humankind prayed that long. He must be getting the message. And also, there was a TM people, Transcendental Meditation, a bunch of people meditating in the middle of the country. And guess what? President Obama changed his mind. We have the power. We have the power. Collectively, we have the power. This is huge. And lastly, I want to say this. Everybody in here has doubts. Everybody does, one point or another. And when you have these doubts, it is so fulfilling to know that science is actually washing these doubts away. Science is proving what we know to be true in our hearts about spirituality. It's proving it to be true. It's an amazing time we live in. Thank you very much for inviting me.